I walked into my home and found it surgically stripped, every memory of my life with him erased. But in his ruthless purge, he overlooked the one thing that would ultimately destroy him. The silence was the first thing that hit me. Not a peaceful Sunday morning silence, but a hollow, predatory silence that eats all other sound. I stood in the doorway of our apartment, my keys still in my hand, and stared into the void. Our home, the place I had poured my heart and soul into for 8 years, was an empty shell. The oversized leather sofa Mark had insisted on, gone. The antique Persian rug we'd haggled for on our honeymoon, gone. The gallery wall of our life together, photos from Paris, from our wedding, from lazy days in the park, was a collection of naked, accusing nails in the plaster. Every frame, every memory he could physically carry was gone. My breath hitched in my chest, a tiny, sharp sound in the crushing emptiness. I walked slowly through the rooms, my footsteps echoing like a stranger's in a museum after hours. The kitchen was stripped bare. He'd even taken the high-end espresso machine I'd bought him for his last birthday. In the bedroom, the mattress was gone, the frame dismantled. All that remained was an indentation in the carpet, a ghost of the life we'd shared. My jewelry box was open and empty on the floor. My clothes were still in the closet, a messy, colorful pile, as if he'd rummaged through them looking for anything of value and found none. It was a calculated act of cruelty, designed to leave me with absolutely nothing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from a number I didn't recognize. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was from Mark. It wasn't an explanation or an apology. It was a final, brutal blow. "It's over, Clara. Everything was in my name, you know that. The apartment, the car, the accounts. I've started a new life. Don't try to find me. Your half of the security deposit will be mailed to your mother's address. And then, a final twisting knife. Good luck with your little scribbles." Little scribbles. That's what he'd always called my work. Mark was a finance guy, a man of solid numbers and tangible assets. He wore sharp suits and measured success in stock portfolios and quarterly reports. I, on the other hand, was a data scientist, but my real passion was a side project, a complex algorithm I'd been developing for years. It lived on whiteboards, in dog-eared notebooks, and in the chaotic landscape of my personal laptop. To Mark, it was just childish babble. I can still hear his voice, laced with that patronizing affection he was so good at. He'd walk in while I was deep in a flow state, staring at a wall covered in equations and logical operators, and he'd chuckle. "What's my little genius cooking up today? The secret to the universe?" he'd ask, kissing the top of my head. Our friends would visit, and he'd gesture to my home office with a wave of his hand. "Don't mind the mad scientist's lab. That's just Clara's art project. Lots of pretty little symbols." He never once asked what it was, what it did, or what it meant to me. It was just a harmless, quirky hobby, my little scribbles. He supported it the way you'd support a child's desire to build a pillow fort in the living room, with amusement and a complete lack of genuine interest. The reality was, I was building a revolutionary data compression algorithm, something that could shrink massive data files to a fraction of their size without losing any integrity, faster and more efficiently than anything on the market. It was my life's work. I'd poured every spare moment, every ounce of intellectual energy into it for the last 5 years. But in Mark's world of concrete assets, my abstract world of code and theory was worthless. It was air. It couldn't be sold. It couldn't be worn. It couldn't be driven. Sinking to the floor in the middle of the empty living room, I let the sobs take over. He'd done it. He'd won. He had meticulously and systematically erased me from his life, taking every single thing of monetary value we had accumulated together. He had drained our joint savings account, leaving me with the $87 in my wallet. He had left me in an empty apartment with the rent due in a week, with no car, no savings, and a heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. He had taken my past and my present and he thought he had taken my future. I sat there for hours, surrounded by the ghosts of our life, believing he was right. I had nothing. Eventually, the tears dried up, leaving behind a cold, hard knot of despair in my stomach. I pushed myself up, my knees aching, and did one last masochistic tour of the damage. He had been so thorough. The TV, the sound system, even the damn toaster. He'd taken the spare laptop I used for browsing, but had left my work computer, an older model he probably deemed worthless. And then I saw it. In the corner of what used to be my office, propped against the wall, was the one thing he hadn't bothered to take. It was my largest whiteboard, a 6-foot by 4-foot monstrosity covered from edge to edge in the final, perfect iteration of my algorithm. To him, it was just a mess of meaningless symbols, a piece of trash not even worth the effort of hauling downstairs. He took the $100 frame from a poster in the hallway, but left this. He saw a whiteboard. He saw Childish babble. He had no idea what he was really looking at. And as my eyes traced the elegant flow of the logic I had bled for, a slow, cold smile spread across my face for the first time that day. He took all the furniture, but he forgot to take the architect's blueprints for a skyscraper. That cold smile turned into a plan. My mind, which had been foggy with grief just moments before, was now crystal clear, running with the same sharp, cold logic as the lines of code on the whiteboard. First things first, preservation. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking not from shock anymore, but from adrenaline. I took dozens of high-resolution photos of the whiteboard from every conceivable angle, capturing every variable, every operator, every last little scribble. I backed them up to 3 separate cloud services, encrypting the files with a key so complex even I would need a moment to recall it. This board was my Declaration of Independence, and I would not let it be lost. The second call was the hardest. I scrolled through my contacts, past all the friends I shared with Mark, and landed on Mom. Swallowing the golf ball of pride lodged in my throat, I pressed the button. She picked up on the second ring. "Clara, honey, I was just thinking about you. How was your week?" Her cheerful, unassuming voice broke a small crack in my armor. I took a shaky breath. "Mom," I started, and that's all I managed before the story came pouring out in a torrent of gasps and broken sentences. The empty apartment, the missing furniture, the text message, the $87. I left out the part about the whiteboard. For now, that was my secret, my weapon. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and then, not the "I told you so" I dreaded, but the fierce, protective voice of the woman who taught me to stand up for myself. "I'm on my way. Pack whatever that bastard left you. You're coming home." An hour later, my mom was there, her small frame radiating an energy that filled the entire empty apartment. She hugged me tight, then surveyed the scene with narrowed eyes. "He didn't even leave you a coffee mug. What kind of monster?" Together, we packed my clothes into trash bags. Mark had taken all the suitcases and collected my few remaining personal effects. The last item was the whiteboard. "What on earth is that, honey?" my mom asked, staring at the wall of equations. I just shook my head. "It's an art project, Mom." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was necessary. We managed to wrestle it into the back of her minivan, and as we drove away from the building, I didn't look back once. The next 48 hours were a blur of shame and furious late-night research in my childhood bedroom. My mom fed me soup and left me alone. I was surrounded by posters of bands I hadn't listened to in a decade, and old academic awards that felt like they belonged to a different person. On my old laptop, the one Mark had sneered at, I dove into the world of intellectual property law. The hourly rates I saw made my stomach clench. Thousands of dollars I didn't have. But I was relentless. I searched for firms that specialized in software and algorithmic patents, firms that had gone up against corporate giants. And then I found her, Evelyn Steele of Keating and Steele. Her bio was formidable. A former lead counsel for a major tech company, she'd left to start her own firm dedicated to helping individual inventors fight for their creations. Her firm's motto was, "We champion the innovator." Best of all, they offered a free 30-minute consultation. I filled out the online form, my heart pounding, summarizing my situation as best I could without revealing the core of the algorithm itself. I clicked submit and held my breath. The next morning, I got a call. It was Evelyn Steele's assistant. Ms. Steele could see me. Tomorrow. The drive into the city felt different this time. I wasn't going home. I was going to war. Evelyn Steele's office was on the 40th floor of a gleaming skyscraper, all glass and steel and quiet, intimidating competence. She wasn't what I expected. She was sharp and impeccably dressed, but her eyes held a spark of rebellious intelligence that put me at ease. I didn't bring the whiteboard, but I had my laptop and the encrypted photo files. I sat across from her at a large mahogany desk, and for the first time, I explained what my childish babble actually was. I didn't use metaphors or analogies. I used the language of my work, the cold, hard terminology of data structures, computational complexity, and lossless compression ratios. As I spoke, I watched her face. Her polite interest slowly morphed into focused intensity. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on the equations I brought up on my screen. She asked pointed, brilliant questions, questions no one, least of all Mark, had ever thought to ask. Questions that showed she didn't just hear me, she understood. When I finished, she was silent for a full minute, just looking at the screen. "Miss Vance," she said finally, her voice low and steady, "if this algorithm can be implemented as elegantly as it's written here, it's not just valuable, it's a key. It could unlock the next generation of data transfer and storage. We're talking hundreds of millions, potentially billions in licensing." A wave of vertigo washed over me. I finally had validation from someone who knew, someone who saw it not as a hobby, but as a key to the future. "Now," she continued, her demeanor shifting back to that of a lawyer, "the first step is a comprehensive search to ensure no one else has beaten you to it. It's highly unlikely with something this unique, but it's essential. Do you have a project name?" "I called it Project Janus," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded, turning to her own monitor, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let's just do a quick preliminary check of the public patent and trademark database for any pending applications with similar keywords." The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft clicking of her keys. I watched the reflection of the screen in her glasses, my entire future hanging in the balance. Her typing slowed, then stopped. A strange expression crossed her face. It wasn't excitement. It was something else, something tight and alarming. "That's odd," she murmured, leaning closer to her screen. "What is it?" I asked, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs again. Evelyn Steele turned her monitor towards me, her face pale. "A provisional patent application was filed 3 days ago for a data compression algorithm based on a dual-vector spatial matrix." My blood ran cold. That was my exact methodology. On the screen, I saw the application details. Applicant, a shell corporation I'd never heard of, but it was the name of the lead inventor listed on the application that made the world tilt on its axis. It wasn't Mark. It was his best friend, David. The name David Chen burned itself onto my retina. David. Quiet, tech-savvy David. Mark's college roommate, the best man at our wedding, the godfather to a child we never had. He was an engineer at a mid-level software company, always kind, always a little bit in Mark's shadow. He'd been over for dinner dozens of times. He'd seen the whiteboard. He'd listened, with what I thought was polite interest, as Mark teased me about my crazy equations. "Clara's going to crack the Enigma code one day," David had joked once, smiling at me over a beer. It wasn't a joke. It was reconnaissance. "A provisional patent application," Evelyn said, her voice pulling me back from the dizzying freefall of Betrayal. "It's a placeholder. It gives them 12 months to file the full non-provisional patent. It establishes a priority date. 3 days ago, Clara. The day after, Mark left you. The timing was surgical. Mark hadn't just cleaned out the apartment, he had orchestrated a heist of my entire intellectual life, using his best friend as the front man. He didn't understand the algorithm, but he understood value. He must have listened to my muttering, my late-night eureka moments, and pieced together just enough to know my scribbles were worth something. He'd probably taken photos of the board long before he left, feeding them to David, the one person in our circle who could decipher my work. The friendly jokes, the feigned interest. It was all an act. They were vultures circling, waiting for the right moment to strike. "He can't do this," I whispered, the words feeling hollow and useless. "It's my work. I have notebooks, drafts, years of research." Evelyn's face was grim. "He can try, and he has. This filing with David's name on it creates a massive legal obstacle. They've fired the first shot and they've aimed to kill. They'll claim David developed it independently. It becomes your word and your years of disorganized notes against a legally filed document with a priority date." She saw the despair in my eyes and held up a hand. But they made a mistake. They were arrogant. A provisional application doesn't have to be perfect. It can be bare bones just enough to secure the date. It means they likely rushed it. And rushed work is sloppy work. Her words were a lifeline. The shock began to recede, replaced by a glacial rage. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice hardening. Evelyn leaned back, her expression shifting from lawyer to strategist. "We fight fire with a goddamn inferno. First, we file our own provisional patent application. Immediately. Today. We will be more thorough, more detailed, and more precise than theirs could ever be. We'll document every stage of your creative process. We'll need your notebooks, your digital files, every scrap of paper you have. We will build a fortress of evidence around your claim of invention so airtight that not a single doubt can get through. This is now a race to prove original authorship." She looked me dead in the eye. "This will be expensive, Clara. The filing fees are just the start. The legal battle to invalidate their claim and prove yours could take years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars." My blood ran cold all over again. "I have $87 and some clothes in a trash bag," I said flatly. "Mark took everything. A flicker of something, sympathy perhaps, or professional fury, crossed her face. "I'm aware," she said. "Keating and Steele sometimes takes on exceptional cases on a contingency basis. We cover the costs, and if we win, we take a percentage of the settlement or licensing revenue." My breath caught. "You'd do that for me?" She gave a thin, decisive smile. "I didn't leave a cushy corporate job to defend corporate thieves. I did it for cases like this. I believe you, Clara, and more importantly, I believe in this algorithm. But you have to be ready. This will be the fight of your life. They will try to bury you in legal motions. They will attack your credibility. They will try to paint you as a bitter, hysterical ex-wife. Are you ready for that?" Was I ready? A week ago, I would have said no. I would have crumpled. But the person who had walked into this office was not the same one who had stood crying in an empty apartment. That person was gone, stripped away along with the furniture and the photo frames. In her place was someone I barely recognized, someone forged in betrayal and fueled by a cold, burning need for justice. "Yes," I said, the word coming out like a steel pellet. "I'm ready." The next few weeks were a frantic blur. I moved all my belongings, the whiteboard, boxes of notes, old hard drives, into a small storage unit. I spent my days at Evelyn's office, working with her team of paralegals to scan, organize, and timestamp every page of my research. We unearthed digital breadcrumbs I'd long forgotten, emails to a professor from my master's program discussing early concepts, time-stamped code snippets saved on old university servers, even metadata from the photos on my phone that proved when they were taken. We were building our arsenal, piece by meticulous piece. Evelyn was a marvel, a whirlwind of focused energy, translating my scientific language into impenetrable legalese. We filed our own, much more detailed provisional patent. The first official shot in our counterattack had been fired. One evening, after a grueling 14-hour day, I was crashing on the pull-out sofa in my mom's living room, scrolling through social media for the first time in weeks. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help it. I typed Mark's name into the search bar. His profile was public, and the latest picture stopped my heart. It was posted just an hour ago. Mark and David beaming, clinking champagne glasses on a balcony overlooking a sparkling city skyline I didn't recognize. The caption was a single, smug word, partners. But it wasn't the picture that made me drop my phone. It was the geotag. They weren't in New York. They weren't even in the country. They were in Zurich, Switzerland, home to some of the world's most powerful banks and most secretive corporations. They weren't just trying to patent my work, they were already trying to sell it. Zurich. The name of the city echoed in my mind like a gunshot. It wasn't just a celebratory trip. Mark didn't do celebratory trips. He did strategic acquisitions. Zurich meant money, old money, and powerful, discreet corporations that valued secrecy above all else. They weren't waiting for the patent to be granted. They were shopping the provisional application around, trying to secure a massive buyout from a company that could afford to fight or bury any subsequent legal challenges. They were moving fast, leveraging the legitimacy of the filing to create a bidding war for an asset they didn't even truly own. "They're selling it," I said, bursting into Evelyn's office the next morning without an appointment, my phone clutched in my hand. "They're in Zurich, and they're selling it right now." Evelyn looked at the picture, her expression unreadable. She didn't panic. She just tapped a pen against her desk, her mind clearly working several moves ahead. "Of course they are," she said calmly. "They're arrogant, but they're not stupid. They know their claim is weak. A provisional patent is a flimsy shield. Their best chance is to offload it quickly to a major player, a company with a legal department bigger than our entire firm, and let them deal with the fallout. They get a huge, immediate payday, and we're left fighting a multi-billion-dollar corporation instead of two greedy individuals." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Mark and David were treating my life's work like a hot piece of stolen art, trying to fence it before the authorities, in this case us, could close in. "So what can we do?" I asked, a familiar wave of helplessness washing over me. "Can we stop them?" "We can't stop them from having meetings," Evelyn said, her gaze sharp and focused, "but we can make sure that anyone they talk to knows exactly what they're buying." Her fingers were already flying across her keyboard. "We need to find out who they're meeting with. A deal of this magnitude in the data compression space. There's a short list of potential buyers, tech giants, major cloud storage providers, multinational telecommunication firms." She spun her monitor around. It was a list of about a dozen corporate behemoths, names that were household words. "We're going to put them on notice, all of them." For the next 2 days, we worked with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Evelyn drafted a formidable cease and desist and a notice of competing claim. It was a legal broadside, laying out my claim to the invention in excruciating detail, referencing my own provisional patent filing, and explicitly warning any potential buyers that they would be purchasing not a revolutionary algorithm, but a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. It was a poison pill, designed to make my stolen work radioactive to any legitimate corporation. Evelyn hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-intelligence officer named Mike, to find out where Mark and David were staying in Zurich. Within hours, he had their hotel and a list of meetings gleaned from a cooperative concierge. The names matched the top 3 on Evelyn's list. Armed with this information, we didn't just mail the notices. We sent them via every conceivable channel, to the heads of their legal departments via international courier, to their M&A divisions via email, and directly to the personal inboxes of their CEOs via secure messaging. We made sure the information was impossible to ignore. Then we waited. The silence was agonizing. 2 days passed, then 3. I imagined Mark and David sitting in polished boardrooms, making the pitch of a lifetime, completely unaware of the digital bomb we had just dropped on their parade. On the 4th day, I got a call from an unknown number with a Swiss country code. My heart leaped into my throat. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from Mark. His voice was no longer smug or patronizing. It was tight, cold, and laced with a fury I had never heard before. "Clara, what the hell did you do? You just cost us a 9-figure deal. You have no idea the hornet's nest you've just kicked. Call me, now." I played the message for Evelyn. She listened, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across her face. "Checkmate," she said softly. "At least for this round. We spooked their buyer. No serious company will touch it now, not with this level of legal risk attached." The relief was so intense it almost brought me to my knees. We had stopped the sale. We had pulled the emergency brake on their runaway train. But the victory felt temporary. Mark's message wasn't a concession. It was a threat. We hadn't won the war. We had just made it personal. A week later, I was served with a lawsuit. It wasn't for patent infringement. It was a strategic lawsuit against public participation, a SLAPP suit. They were suing me for tortious interference, claiming my frivolous and unsubstantiated claims had intentionally sabotaged their legitimate business deal. They were also suing me for defamation. And they weren't asking for a small sum. They were demanding $50 million in damages. It was a classic bully tactic. They were trying to bleed me dry, to bury me in legal fees and scare me into dropping my patent claim. It was a declaration of total war, designed to financially and emotionally bankrupt me. The document was thick with legal jargon, but one section stood out. It was a sworn affidavit from David. In it, he laid out a detailed, fabricated timeline of his invention process. He described late nights in his own workshop, moments of inspiration, and even included manipulated photos of his own whiteboards covered in what looked like earlier, less refined versions of my algorithm. It was a masterful work of fiction. But then I saw the date of his supposed breakthrough moment, the cornerstone of his entire claim. He stated, under penalty of perjury, that he had finalized the core concept of the dual-vector spatial matrix on the evening of August 14th of the previous year during a solitary brainstorming session at his home. I stared at that date, my mind racing. August 14th. It sounded familiar. I pulled up the calendar on my phone, my thumb scrolling frantically back through the months, and then I found it. August 14th. My birthday. David hadn't been home alone having a stroke of genius. He was at my apartment celebrating with me and Mark, and I had the proof. I had a 30-second video on my phone, a silly clip of Mark bringing out my birthday cake, candles blazing, and standing right behind him, smiling and clapping along with everyone else, was David Chen. In the background, clear as day and perfectly in focus, was my whiteboard, covered in the exact set of equations he was now claiming to have invented that very night. My hands were shaking as I showed the video to Evelyn. August 14th, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and vindication. My birthday. He's perjuring himself. Evelyn watched the short clip, her lawyerly composure melting away into a wide, predatory grin. She replayed it 3 times, zooming in on the whiteboard behind David's smiling face. The equations were unmistakable. "Oh, David," she murmured to the screen, "you monumentally stupid man." She looked up at me, her eyes glittering like diamonds. "This is it, Clara. This is the silver bullet. This isn't just evidence for our patent case anymore. This is evidence of criminal perjury and fraud. He lied in a sworn federal declaration. This is no longer just a civil matter." The SLAPP suit, their big, scary weapon, had just become their Achilles heel. They had been so confident, so arrogant in their deception, that they hadn't bothered to cross-reference their lies with our actual lives. They had erased me so completely from their narrative that they forgot I had a memory. I had a history. I had a phone full of photos and videos, a digital ghost of the life they thought they had successfully buried. Evelyn's strategy shifted immediately from defense to a full-scale assault. We didn't just respond to their lawsuit, we filed a motion to dismiss and attached the video as Exhibit A. We also filed for sanctions against David and his legal team for filing a frivolous and fraudulent lawsuit. But Evelyn didn't stop there. She hand-delivered a copy of our filing, complete with a high-resolution still from the video, to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's Office of Enrollment and Discipline, which investigates fraud. And for her final move, she sent a copy to the district attorney's office, along with a carefully worded letter suggesting they might be interested in a clear-cut case of felony perjury. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. Within 48 hours, David's lawyers had dropped him as a client, citing irreconcilable differences. The slap suit was withdrawn so fast it left a sonic boom. The next call came not from Mark, but from a high-priced lawyer from a downtown firm, representing both Mark and David. The tone was no longer threatening, it was desperate. They wanted to settle. We met in a sterile conference room in Evelyn's building. It was the first time I had seen Mark since the day he left. He looked smaller, diminished. The tailored suit couldn't hide the panic in his eyes. David sat beside him, pale and visibly sweating, refusing to look at me. Their lawyer, a slick man with a practiced smile, tried to control the narrative, talking about misunderstandings and mutual resolutions. Evelyn let him talk for about 5 minutes before she cut him off. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," she said, her voice like ice. "Your clients conspired to steal my client's intellectual property. They filed a fraudulent patent application. Then, Mr. Chen committed perjury in a federal document, and Mr. Vance was party to that fraud. The district attorney is very interested in our evidence. So this is not a negotiation. This is a surrender. Here are our terms." She slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was beautiful in its simplicity. 1. They would sign a legally binding document, notarized and filed with the court, relinquishing any and all claims to the algorithm, now and forever, and formally assigning all rights and inventorship of their provisional patent to me. 2. They would issue a formal written apology for the theft, the lawsuit, and the perjury. 3. Mark would return every single physical item he took from the apartment, or pay the full current replacement value. But the final term was Evelyn's masterstroke. 4. They would pay a settlement. Not to me, but to cover 100% of my legal fees, and then they would make a substantial 7-figure donation in my name to a nonprofit organization that supports female inventors and STEM education. Mark's jaw dropped. "A donation? What about Clara?" Evelyn smiled. "Clara doesn't need your money. Clara has Project Janus. This isn't about profit, this is about principle. You tried to erase her and her work. Now you will fund the next generation of women just like her. It's poetic, don't you think?" They had no choice. They were facing criminal charges. They signed everything. The months that followed were a whirlwind. With the legal challenges gone, and with undisputed ownership of the patent, the world opened up. The very companies Mark and David had tried to sell to were now calling me, but I didn't sell. Guided by Evelyn, who had become more of a partner than just a lawyer, I formed my own company. We licensed the Janus algorithm, retaining full ownership and control. The childish babble on my whiteboard became the new industry standard for data compression, licensed by a dozen of the biggest tech companies on the planet. I was no longer the woman with $87 in her wallet. I was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation. I never spoke to Mark or David again. I heard through the grapevine that David lost his engineering license due to the fraud investigation and was struggling to find work. Mark, stripped of the assets he had stolen and the reputation he had built on a lie, faded into obscurity. The check for my legal fees and the massive donation cleared. The charity sent me a beautiful letter, thanking me for being an inspiration. Sometimes, late at night, in the sleek minimalist office of my new company, I look at the one thing I brought with me from my old life. It's the whiteboard now encased in glass like a priceless piece of art hanging on the wall. It's a reminder. Not of the betrayal, but of the fact that the most valuable things in your life are not the ones that can be packed into a moving van. They are the things you create, the ideas you nurture, the little scribbles that no one else understands. Mark thought he had taken everything, but he only took the props. He left the script, the story, and the star of the show, and her story was just beginning.